I'd like to call this meeting of the Historic District Landmark Board, April the 8th, 2021 to order. And I'd like to call roll. Mr. Robert David Gonzalez.
Present.
Maria Elena Morales. Maria Elena Morales. Is she logged in, Vanessa?
No, she's not.
Cristina Davila Villarreal.
Present.
Wayne Nance.
Present.
Stanley Green.
Here.
Priscilla Iglesias.
Here.
Mark Gonzalez.
Present. Here.
Justin Allen Hunsnerger. I don't know, Vanessa, did he request an excused absence?
He did.
He mentioned to us last meeting that noon meetings would be impossible for him. And so I was hoping that we could continue to meet at a time that was convenient for all members. Perhaps we can discuss that later, Mr. Snideman. Rebecca Sepulveda present. So we have a quorum. Item 3, approval of minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes that were sent in our packet?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minute. I'll second that motion.
When you make a motion or a second, can you please provide your name for the record?
Mark Gonzalez making the motion. Wayne Nance providing a second.
Thank you.
So there's a motion and second to approve the minutes. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Item 4. Item 4A, public hearing and consideration of a motion to consider facade and site improvements at 1519 Matamoros Street in the St. Peter's Historic District, case number HD 0042021. Do we need a motion to open the public hearing, Mr. Snideman?
No, ma'am, not yet. We have a staff presentation we'd like to share, and then at the end, at the end of that, you can speak with the applicant, and then at that point, maybe open the public hearing. We can put the number up for the public to call.
All right.
Can we proceed with the presentation?
Please.
Ms. Vanessa?
Sure. The applicant for this case is Kyra Properties owner. Arturo Tomas Benavides is the applicant. The property is located at 1519 Matamoros Street in the Historic Residential Office District. The request is to renovate and restore the exterior of the existing structure, including painting of facade, removal of accessory structures, and replacement of fencing. Proposed exterior improvements require board approval. 20 letters were sent out. None were received either for or against. This is a location map. This is an aerial view of the location. This is a front view of the structure. This is a side view of the existing structure. This is an existing site plan of the primary structure and the accessory structures. This is a front and rear view, including a diagram of the wrought iron burglar bars. This is a left and right side view of the existing structure. This is a view of the fencing, the current fencing with the temporary chain link fence. And this is a schematic of the proposed new fencing. This is the color that they're proposing to paint the exterior, white hyacinth. And these are pictures of the typical cracking that they're proposing to repair. And some of the typical damage that is seen throughout the existing structure. Staff recommends approval. The proposed improvements are compatible with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and illustrated guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. The improvements are also compatible with the city's historic preservation plan and the urban design guidelines. Also, the applicant will be improving and activating a currently vacant property. For all these reasons, staff recommends approval. And there's the proposed motion either to approve or deny the request, the application for HD 004-2021 for the proposed improvements. And this is the number that the public may call. That's the end of my presentation.
Do we have someone for the applicant that will speak on behalf of the item?
Kirby, I don't think
John Washington.
we can't hear you, Kirby.
Oops, sorry about that. Mr. Washington, go ahead.
Yes. No, I was saying that I'm here.
Would you like to say a few words about your proposal or?
Yes,
Ms. Sepulveda, if I may, maybe it's a little easier since we just gave the presentation, John, of what you're proposing. Could we ask if any of the board members have any questions for the applicant, for John, specific questions that he can answer? So he doesn't have to reiterate anything we already just reviewed. Is that okay?
That's fine. Are there any questions from the board?
And we will notify you if anyone from the public calls in.
How long should we wait for public comment?
There's about a 30-second lag, so if we're receiving any, we'll be able to notify you here already, and we're not receiving any.
Okay, so there's no comments or input from the board. Any questions about the proposed changes to this building?
Just
I'm
for
only curious on
clarification, I'm sorry,
when they
I
plan
didn't
on getting-
see, I didn't actually, this is Cristina Villarreal. I really didn't get to review the packet very well because I don't think I got it. I'm not sure, but I tried to download it online and what I was able to retrieve online. Just for clarification, the bars are already there? The burglar bars, Kirby?
Mr.
They
Washington,
are there. They are. Yes, they are there.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what is, for my clarification, what is going to be painted?
Well, we're just going to try to make them look nicer. We're going to make them look more like the wrought iron fence. So we're going to have that more like that design, not just have them plain the way they are.
Okay,
Kind of looks like a jail right now.
right. Okay, that was my clarification, just to make sure that I understand where the paint was actually gonna go.
Oh, the paint? The paint itself?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
The paint will be on the whole house.
Mm.
Entire house. The entire house has damage on the siding, the facade, the concrete facade. In order to stop it, we need to seal it real good and paint it with a good paint. And there's a lot of repairs, a lot of concrete repairs. And there's no way we're going to match the existing concrete with new concrete. And we need to but NP1, a lot of cracks. So with an industrial caulking, in order to cover all that up, we need to put a really good paint on there.
So, as far as the guidelines go, Kirby, what does it say about painting original material? Because that house is not currently painted, right? It's original material.
That's correct, but as Mr. Washington stated, in this condition, while that looks like stone, it's in fact concrete and it's permeable. And it's because of that and because it was never sealed. Maybe initially it was sealed, but it wasn't maintained over the years, or maybe it wasn't ever sealed. Because concrete's permeable, it can degrade over time, and that's what they're seeing. So they want to be able to do those repairs, but in doing that and resealing it, it would leave it inconsistent. So they want to have it uniform, and to achieve that uniform look, they need to paint over it with a painter and sealer. So it'll both protect and give it a uniform color. So that is compatible with the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. You know, generally paint is not looked favorably upon, except in the cases where it can help maintain the structure or the material. In this case, that's what it's going to be doing. It's not just aesthetic; it's also for protection.
And you had also asked about the burglar bars. The reason why we want to keep them on there is just because in the past we've had problems with break-ins. People have used it for housing. You name it, it's happened in that house. So that's one reason why we want to leave the burglar bars on there, but we'd like to make them look a lot nicer than what they currently are. So we'll definitely be dressing them up. And you had asked about painting. I'm not sure if there's any regulations on the painting for the burglar bars, but if there are colors that we need to choose from on those, we would be happy to do so and represent that to the board.
Could you introduce yourself just for the record, ma'am?
I'm sorry, this is Leslie Benavides. My husband is the owner, Arturo Benavides.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? If not, I would like to request a motion to approve or deny.
Stan Green, I move we approve.
This is Wayne Nance. I second that motion. I reviewed the plans and it looks like it'll certainly be a betterment.
So there's a motion and a second to approve the application for the proposed improvements located at 1519 Matamoros Street. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I believe we have the motion passed.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Washington, Ms. Benavides, thank you very much. You can log off now. And if you have any questions, Ms. Guerra will assist you after the meeting.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot.
It'll be a great improvement to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The next item is item 4B, public hearing and consideration of a motion to consider facade improvements at 920 Iturbide Street in the Old Mercado Historic District. Will staff make a presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Vanessa Guerra for the record again. The applicant is Frank Roof Properties Limited Partnership, and it's the owner. Julian Rotnowski is the representative. The property is located at 920 Iturbide Street in the Arts and Entertainment District. The request is the installation of an LED neon sign on the east side of the building. Again, 20 letters were sent out. None were received either for or against. This is a location map. This is an aerial view. This is sort of a front view of, and this is the I guess rear view of the property where the sign is proposed to be installed. And this is the proposed sign. You'll see it shows the color of the lettering, the size of the font. This is a day and a night view of the proposed sign.
Note that this was assigned previously at the El Centro Hotel, a historic sign.
This is a site plan showing the location of the placement of the sign and the elevation of the sign all placed on the wall. Again, staff recommends the approval of the proposed improvements. They're compatible with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and illustrated guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings. They're also generally compatible with the city's preservation plan and urban design guidelines. And while the proposed improvements are located on the side of the building, which is generally not recommended, the proposed improvements preserve a historic sign and do not obscure any character-defining feature of the building. For those reasons, staff recommends approval. And there's the proposed motion either to approve or deny the request of the application, and this is the phone number where the public can call in.
And Ms. Sepulveda, we do have Ms. Frank here to speak. The representative was not able to be here. If the commission, if the board members have any questions, she's here to answer.
I have a question. I'm assuming, but perhaps she can clarify, this is not truly a sign for the function of the building, but it's more of an artistic addition, sort of like a mural would be, or is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So I would like to see if when we approve this motion, we can add some language to that, because I don't know whether we should be approving this as a sign when it's not a sign. This is more of an public art, and I think it has a different function than a sign, than a regular sign would. I don't know if you agree with that.
That's a good point, Ms. Sepulveda, and a good opportunity to review that whenever something comes before the historic board, this is one step where if something does require a permit, this doesn't guarantee that they'll get that permit. So when this is evaluated by the building department, and that is a good question that we'll probably be discussing, this is not, while it is technically a sign, it's not a sign in the sense that we, it maybe should be regulated more as a mural. So that's going to be definitely a discussion that building department will have with the applicant. This doesn't guarantee them approval of any permit that they may need. This is just the approval they'll need for the historic district to make this change.
And there are also sign restrictions in our guidelines that discuss dimension, color, all of that. So I don't think we should apply any of that to this particular sign, because this is more of an artistic expression. So
yes, by approving this, you'll permit it.
okay.
Well, you'll allow it, but it still has to get, it may still have to get permitted by the building department.
I just don't want to set precedent regarding signage at this point, because it's not a sign, it's public art. All right, are there any other comments from the board?
Yes, I'm curious where this, forgive me for not knowing, but where was El Centro Motel? Where was this sign taken from, the address? And when?
IBC bought it downtown, it's a downtown lot, and turned it into a parking lot. And before they turned it into a parking lot, we asked them to remove the sign to save it.
Okay, so it's in the IBC place right off the 35 in downtown? That's where it was located?
No, little banquito that's on, I guess it's
On Matamoros, I believe.
the corner of Matamoros and San Agustin.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's good. That's interesting.
Out across the street, they have a, like about 50 spaces there. They tore down the whole thing.
Okay. I guess I'm just curious, this doesn't have anything to do with the way that I vote here, but I'm just curious, I guess the thinking was that it matches the corridor of the bars and, in that area, which are, a nice thing. And I guess this just expands on that, this property and will make it more, amenable or more desirable for a similar, use in that area. Is that the thinking, or?
Well, the thing is, it's the entertainment corridor of downtown. And, we have had this sign in storage for about 8 years, and we wanted to figure out a place to, use it. In Las Vegas, they collect all the old signs that are not used anymore, and they put them up in different places. It's kind of like part of a historic, referencing part of the historic parts of downtown, even though they're not there anymore. These are remnants of them. And we thought it would be a nice addition to the street.
Mr. Nance, I had to mute you because we were getting some feedback. So if you need to, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, excuse me. I said, I feel that it kind of matches the character of that street, of that avenue. So, yes, I agree. I was just curious about where you were going with that. Thank you. That's all.
And we didn't receive any comments from the public.
All right, so there's no public comment. Do I hear a motion to approve or deny the request?
Mark Gonzalez, I make a motion to approve.
I second.
There's a motion and second to approve the request for the proposed improvements located at 920 Iturbide Street. All in favor, show of hands.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Don't forget this does.
Everybody, nice to see everybody.
Don't forget that this does need to go to the building department for review, and let us know if we can help in any way with that. You can contact Ms. Guerra after the meeting, and she'll be happy to help and assist in that.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, but I did intend for the motion to perhaps be amended to reflect that we were not approving a sign, but we're improving a piece of art. And perhaps the minutes can reflect that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kirby, I have a quick question for you. If I excuse myself for about 2 minutes, y'all still can proceed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. The next item is item 5A1, staff presentation and recommendation on a proposed ordinance amendment clarifying that only activity which requires a building permit and is not considered repair or maintenance requires landmark board review.
Okay, to give a presentation, it'll be fairly brief. Okay, so let me review with you the existing ordinance. There are several places in the code that refer to the Historic District Landmark Board, two main ones in the beginning and then towards the middle. They both speak to some of the powers and duties of the historic board and the historic district, but where it's most succinct is in section 24.66.4, and this was shared with you in the packet. This is the part that's not italicized. So it reads number 1 and 2. So this is existing code. This is what's already on the books. No permit shall be issued for the alteration, construction, demolition of any structure located in a historic district and or any locally significant historic landmark without approval of the Historic District Landmark Board. Provided, however, that immediate demolition may be ordered by the building official for any structure in imminent danger of collapse, which is, in the opinion of the building official, represents significant threat to public safety. Number 2, under provisions related to historic districts and locally significant landmarks. Number 2 is no permit shall be issued for the installation of any sign or monument in the historic district without prior approval of the Historic District Landmark Board. So I brought this up before to the board, and that is that what the code says is the city can't issue permits for these activities. It doesn't speak to activity that is not permitted. So reading this and as city staff and city government, when we're enforcing ordinance, we are required to go with the most generous interpretation. That's the legally safe way to go, not to interpret this to say, hey, well, it doesn't talk about unpermitted activity, so let's say that all that has to be approved as well. When I read this, I read what this is restricting is permitted activity, because the city's not allowed to issue a permit, but it doesn't say we can restrict unpermitted activity. Now, when I brought this up previously, the historic board members said, well, that's not the way we've been interpreting it, over the years. And so what we talked about then was we need to make it clear, one way or the other. So that's what we're suggesting with the number 3. So number 1 and 2 talk about we can't issue permits for these activities. Number 3 is going to make this very clear so the line is easily understandable for anybody, applicants and city staff and board members. And it would read, following activities are exempt from Historic District Landmark Board review. A, the proposed use, interior arrangement, or interior design of any structure. B, repairs and renovations to existing buildings which do not alter the exterior appearance. C, activity which does not require a building permit. And D, the addition, repair, or renovation of utilities and services such as power, water, sewer, and communication lines. Now I want to note that A and B are already in the code. They're just in that other section in the beginning of the code. And I want to have it all in one place so that an applicant, I could easily point to this and say, hey, it's all in one place. So A and B are just a reiteration of what are already in the code. C and D are the only things that are new. Activity which does not require a building permit, and then, utility lines. Now, we did talk with we did receive an email, and we're going to have a communication with the Texas Historic Commission. They made some good suggestions, and I think maybe when we send this forward, we'll recommend as well to the City Council that we include a provision for administrative approval. And what this would allow is, it says the Historic District Landmark Board may authorize staff to administratively approve activities which require board approval. So of the things that do require board approval, you can authorize us in a meeting like this to say, okay, Kirby, we don't want to have to hear all these things. You can administratively approve them when they fit these parameters. So that's a good recommendation we can consider. And then, Ms. Sepulveda, you did ask, we could give you some examples of what's permitted and not unpermitted. So generally, these are just some examples, but these are the most common. So meeting with the building department, talking about what requires a permit. In other words, what would come before the historic board? By the way, everything brought to you today would have they would have had to bring all that to the historic board for approval. So it's generally most of the stuff that people are bringing are before you already. What they're not bringing is things people don't think they need a permit for, which they're assuming they don't need historic approval for anyway. In other words, people are assuming the way we want to write the rules are the way they are. So what would require historic approval are the things on the left, which are permitted. These are just examples. It's not an endless list. Structural work, site obscuring fences, electrical fixtures, roofing, stucco and siding requires building permit. Utility work, pools, palapas, building additions, windows require permit if they're doing new windows. I was incorrect about that last time. Ingress, egress, if they're changing anything about ingress, egress, driveways, and curb cuts, which they're changing the site, those all require permits. So those would all still need to come before the board. What could, when we make that line, what wouldn't is landscaping would be, doesn't require permits. Short see-through fences, non-electrical fixtures, an example would be you want to hang a mailbox on your house, that doesn't require a permit, so it's not going to require historic approval. Doors and painting. I know painting's a big one for you, but again, it's not something that is structural, it's not something that's permanent, and so it doesn't require a permit. So that is, here's the motion. Motion to recommend approval now of the amendment to the Land Development Code, section 24.66.4.2. Any questions from board members?
Yes, Kirby. This is Priscilla Iglesias. I'm the executive director. And I contacted the Texas Historical Commission.
Ms. Iglesias, you're cutting in and out. Maybe if you suspend your video, it might be a little easier for us to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me a little bit better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, perfect. So I contacted the Texas Historical Commission regarding, the discussion that we had at our last meeting, because I wanted to make sure that, painting, that issue that we have is covered, and that we cover it in any changes that we might be making. So when I spoke to them, their concern, I guess their recommendation is not so much the colors or the schemes that we would be approving or not approving, but it would be just making sure that owners are not painting on brick or original materials to the house. So if painting is not, doesn't need to be permitted, but how can we maybe incorporate something in there that, if the brick is not already painted, that they wouldn't be able to do that, only because that painting, original material can sometimes cause more issues in the future and for a historic home. So that's just kind of what
I want to, I'm sorry, Kirby, if I can interject, because this is a really good point that Priscilla brings, especially with the first item that we had for approval today. I think that's a perfect example of a building that has original material that is being painted over. And I do believe that falls under line item B, where it says repairs and renovations to existing buildings which do not alter the exterior appearance. Well, that painting of that building is going to significantly alter the appearance of that building. So in that case, that paint job, I feel, should go through Landmark Board, because they are painting over the original material. Of course, it got approved today because there is a purpose for that. But at what point do you let the owner make that subjective, I guess, choice on a very important building? Because that's a building that many of us are familiar with, and that is going to be quite a change. It's going to be a good improvement, but it is going to be a change. So that was a good example today of why that considering the paint is important.
What you can do, Ms. Iglesias and Ms. Villarreal, is in this proposed motion, you could include a recommendation that a recommendation to approve this with the addition that paint is not exempt. Paint is something that you do want to have oversight of. So unpermitted activity, that's fine, except for paint. Paint you still want to come before you. And then what we can talk about in a future meeting is, how do we set it up administratively where you can say, these things are approved. Administratively, we could say, okay, if you're repainting a different color, but it's these colors, okay, it doesn't have to go to the board. Administratively, we've already said we like these things, but if it's going to paint over original material, that has to come to us for review. So in other words, to say again, you could just approve this motion with the addition that paint is not exempt. and then we'll work out later an administrative review of that.
Just volunteering a little 2 letters. I don't know if this would take care of what you were trying to address last time, Kirby, and at the same time respect what everybody else is trying to do. Would the term repainting address that? Because you know, obviously the bricks today, I mean, they are not painted. Everybody's correct. I mean, if you're painting over bricks and stuff, that's not good. But I think what you're trying to do is make it easier for someone that already has, for instance, a wood veneer house and it's blue and they want to repaint it blue or yellow or whatever. I think where you're trying to go is to streamline that process. So the repainting would be allowed, but a new painting would not be allowed. Of course, you can handle that in your upcoming administrative number 4, but you know, it kind of accomplishes the same thing as addressing it right now.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. So you could motion to recommend approval.
I want to hear from the board if they feel that that's adequate or if it needs a lot more detail to attention.
How does everyone feel about those suggestions? I would also like to include doors. I know we talked about windows are already requiring a permit. I just don't understand why a door would not require a permit. And going back to your very first opening discussion presentation, I think the word permit, staff is new and has been interpreting the word permit the way most cities do when you're going to a building official to request a permit. But we have been enforcing this ordinance assuming that permit meant approval, that meant appropriateness, that meant our whatever we do to allow these things. Other cities have certificates of appropriateness. I wish we had something like that instead of the word permit, but we don't. But we've been using it in that sense, not in the sense of building permit. But I agree what you're trying to do is to make things easier for the public. And so you're trying to tie it to a function that's already within the city's processes. I can appreciate that. But if we can go back to the language of that draft, perhaps we could, activity which does not require a building permit and which does not alter the exterior appearance would include paint, doors, windows, anything like that.
Well, I would recommend against that because that's already here under repair and maintenance, which doesn't alter existing appearance, but we want to allow alterations to the existing appearance that don't affect the existing structure. Because what we're interested in preserving is the structure. We don't care necessarily about the landscaping, the minor fixtures that can be taken on and off easily, the little things that generally don't require a building permit, and that way we give more flexibility to the property owner. Because as you know, all of you that are homeowners or renters, wherever you live, you don't sit down once a year and figure out everything you're going to do to your home and your property and then do it all at once. You're strolling, at Home Depot, and you're like, oh, that looks nice. Let me hang that up. Or let me do this. Or let me do this little project this weekend. I've got some time. But to have to come to historic approval every time something changes the appearance, I think is burdensome. But more than that, I think they're just not doing it. I mean, if you look in the historic district, people are just not coming to you for a lot because there's not a mechanism there to catch them versus having a fine line where if it does require a permit, now we know because it's going to come here to us. And then it's very easy for us to enforce on that. If and when we do have the staff availability to go into the neighborhood and patrol it in terms of looking for activity that's not permitted, it makes it a lot easier to have this clear definition, whereas it's been unclear for many years.
So how would you add the replacement of a front door?
So we could just, your recommendation on this motion can be, you recommend approval, except you want to exclude paint and doors. You still want to have oversight on paint and doors. We'll work out the language, but we know what you're suggesting. You want to still have purview over new paint is one option, or all paint and doors.
What
So you want
about,
that to still come to the board.
yes, what about original architectural features? For example, if you have a Victorian home with a, intricate woodwork on your porch, but the wood is rotting, and so you do not have to get a building permit to replace all the pickets on that porch, but that alters the appearance of the property. How would you include that? I mean, if we're trying to be specific,
Yeah.
that's another example.
My recommendation would not be to include that. In working with historic districts all over the state and also the nation, there's a variation in where cities are at and where markets are at. In downtown Austin, that's a very different market than somewhere like Laredo, where the resources maybe aren't there to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands in some cases, to do the restoration work. That market is certainly there in some of our bigger cities. But in our smaller cities, what you find is there's generally more room for the property owner to be able to make those decisions themselves. With the trust, that doesn't mean we're not involved. We can be involved in incentivizing, we can be involved in guiding, but we're not using a restrictive hand. We're not trying to say, no, you can't do this unless you do it this way, which is very expensive. But we can always be there as a resource to say, hey, if you're interested in doing restorative work, we've got these resources, we've got these possible incentives, and those are things we're going to be working on over the next year as we update our plans and things we talked about last time. But I would recommend, if you're looking for a staff recommendation, that we don't need to go that far, and we can't go that far given the market, given the situation of the state of the condition of our historic district.
I have a question, Kirby. I know you're saying that letter B was already part of the ordinance. I guess my issue with it is that at what is defined as an alter to the exterior appearance? What is that based on? Is there a definition for that? Is that well defined? What might be what one perceives as altering the exterior appearance of something? You get what I'm saying? Because to me, yeah, we could put in the word paint, but if it wasn't there, I would still think that was included in that. I guess what Mrs. Sepulveda is saying is it's important to define things a little bit better. Also, my time on the Landmark Board, and even before I was on the Landmark Board, I went for many years, and I always thought that we would only oversee changes that were to the facade of the building that were visible from the street. I don't know if any of the other people that have served on this board had that same interpretation of what part of our role was, but I think that is also something, I don't know, that I would maybe want to clarify. I know you said that language is not in the ordinance, but I think it should be clarified, because if somebody's making some sort of repair that, to a balcony or something that is not visible from the street, well, and maybe it shouldn't have to come to Landmark Board.
Well, I would argue that it should, if it's affecting the structure. If it's not a repair or renovation, then it should come to you, because we want to preserve that, and we don't know in the future if that will become visible or how it will affect the rest of the structure if you start making additions to the back. So I think it's important. The way it's written is good. You don't want to be so defining that we can't be exhaustive in all the situations. To me, it's pretty clear. This is covering repair and renovations, so it's not all activity. It's repair and renovations. This is B. Repair and renovations which don't alter the exterior appearance. So clearly if somebody's changing something where the appearance is altered, then okay, That is something that needs to be brought to the board. Versus if they're just going to repaint or they're just going to fix something, a railing that was, that's already there and nothing's changing. Visually, it's not changing. I think the way that maybe wasn't practiced is because if somebody is making changes to their backyard and we can't see it, well, how are we going to enforce that? I think practically, but just because that's the case, I wouldn't want someone to assume they can make changes to their structure, which that's the most important thing we do as a historic board, is we're protecting that structure. Because a lot of these little things, these paints and these fixtures, it can be changed easily. Once you start altering the structure, now you're losing something you can never get back. And so that is very important. I wouldn't want someone to think they could alter that without board approval, just because it's in the rear, which a lot of people are doing. But we want to be clear, if something went to get a permit, the building department knows, oh, okay, we can't issue this building permit because it's affecting the appearance. It's not a repair and maintenance, it's a change. And even though it's in the back, historic district still needs to approve it. And then they'll evaluate whether or not it's a good change or not. In other words, my recommendation is, I think as written here, that this is good. This is a huge improvement. It doesn't mean that this is the last we'll ever change, but I think it's a huge improvement over what we have currently.
So if staff were to receive a request under this new language that would change the color, isn't that considered altering the exterior appearance? Doesn't color already fall under that language?
Yes, I mean, but it's not a permitted activity. So the way it flows in number 3 is, A is anything interior. We're not reviewing that. B, you don't have to bring any, if it's a repair and maintenance, whether or not it requires a building permit, if it's repair and maintenance and it doesn't change the existing appearance, then they don't need to come to historic board. So they're just repairing something and it's going to look the same. It's going to stay the same. C is all other activity which doesn't require a building permit. So regardless if it changes the appearance, if it doesn't require a building permit, like landscaping and non-electrical fixtures, things like that, that's okay. That doesn't have to come. Those are minor things, don't have to come to the board for approval. And then D, these things generally do require building permit, but they're meant to service the building. I don't think you want to come here every time someone wants to get, a satellite connection or an internet connection. You have to make them come to you to hook up I don't think you want that. And we don't think that'd be good either. So we're exempting that. Now, that's as written. If you want, like I said, you can say, we can we'll write in a couple lines that say, if we're changing the color, or if it's new paint, then that we want still to go to the board. And if it's doors, if you're changing the doors, then we want that to go to the board. That can also be your recommendation with this motion, if those two areas. I would argue, if you're asking me, I would argue that I don't think you need to make the addition for the paint. I think we've already got I've made this statement before, we've got a large mix of paint, colors and styles in the district. We don't have a historic vernacular. We don't have an overarching vernacular that we're trying to stay true to. We've got a rainbow palette in all of our districts. And I would if it were me, I would recommend leaving it up to the property owner to make that decision. And what you see is that generally property owners will make good decisions in terms of, they don't buy these properties to degrade them. They buy them because they want to invest in them and take care of them. And I would err on the side of trusting the property owner that they're going to do that. But why have historic approval? Because on the most important things, the biggest things, the structure, we want to take a look at that and make sure they're doing it right. On the little things that can be changed, like paint, we shouldn't burden the property owner to have to come every time they want to do something minor. We should have a clear line in the sand and let them have the same freedom that the rest of the property owners in Laredo would have to make those decisions themselves. And but on the big things, come to you. That's my recommendation. my recommendation is as written, it's good, but if you want to add anything onto that as a recommendation, certainly you can as a board.
I would like to see staff come up with some kind of a matrix that is used when an applicant comes or calls and says, I want to do this. You can send them some chart that says, if you're going to replace a door, yes, you need approval. If you're going to change a window, yes, you need approval. If you're going to paint over original brick or other masonry, those kind of things I think you need to have some specificity to it. It's, again, very generic, which is something that I thought you were trying to avoid from the beginning. And so I think we do need to have some specifics that will help and guide the public on what things they can and can't do. And these can be easily put on your website, and people can just read along a little matrix chart and find out what requires approval.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. And when the council makes their decision on this, we will, we are in the process of developing those kind of resources for applicants. So yes, just to reiterate, my recommendation is to recommend approval as it's written. Of course, as a board, if you want to modify, or if you want to deny this or recommend denial, or if you want to recommend approval, but with additional provisions, that's certainly within your purview to do so as a board. But this provides a clear line of what does and doesn't require historic approval. But yes, it does err on the side of being generous with the property owner, allowing them to make decisions on unpermitted activity, which I trust the property owners, they're going to do a good job. And what we want to do is get them to be compliant and not get them to try to sneak it in and do it themselves. So I think it's good as with these additions. And but if you think otherwise, you could make a motion to the effect.
So Kirby, we put in something on administrative approvals. Technically, if we did include paint.
I'm sorry, could everybody mute themselves but Ms. Villarreal, so that there's not the echo? Thank you.
If we should move to approve as presented with the provisions of still overseeing paint and doors, and add the clause about administrative approvals, technically they could just go to you, and if you believed that it was something that really didn't require waiting, for the next meeting, then that would kind of shorten that period, correct?
Well, if you agree with the provision of administrative approval, which I think we need a process there, or we need the authority there in the code for you to give us authority for administrative approval. So with that, then at a future meeting, we could figure out what you're comfortable with staff approving and what you're not comfortable with staff approving. We can come up with some recommendations and work on that in the future. So yeah, that is a good suggestion.
And then on the permitted activity, it says short fences. What's classified as a short fence?
I believe 6 feet. If it's above 6 feet, it requires a building permit. Also, if it's using certain materials which are not opaque, which aren't see-through, also requires a building permit, like masonry fences. So not all fences require a building permit, some do.
See, the issue with the fences is, like somebody brought up, the cyclone fences. I know it's a cheaper solution, and I don't believe that it provides any extra protection. If the protection thing is what people are saying, they feel more protected with a cyclone fence, I don't think so. I think that could be easily climbed over, but that is something that definitely changes
when you're not experiencing
the building. It really I agree that the city needs to find a way to incentivize helping the property owner build the appropriate fence to safeguard that building. But until we have a feasible way of doing that, I don't feel comfortable with that, including the fencing.
When you're ready, Ms. Sepulveda, we could entertain a motion if you.
Are there any proposed wording changes, or is someone ready to make a motion to approve or deny this request?
Recommend approval or denial.
I have a proposed motion, but I want to make sure that this is that incorporates everything I think that we've all voiced. Okay, here we go. I move to approve the Laredo Land Development Code Section 246642 amendments as presented, with the inclusion of oversight still being on doors, paint, and fencing to still come before the board, and for the motion to also include implementation of board of administration approval contingent on the board setting parameters on that at a future meeting. Did that make sense?
Is there a second to that motion?
Ms. Iglesias, I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve recommendations with the modifications that Ms. Cristina Villarreal has stated, and I'm sure she'll provide to staff. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
If I can also just make a quick comment, just for Kirby, your staff's side of it, so you're aware what Main Street can provide as a service to the Main Street district, but if we could help you on other resources, we'd be more than happy to. But we provide design guidance and assistance for any building in the Main Street district. And so if you wanted information on that, or you point people to our direction to be able to assist with that, so that and all of that meets the needs.
Okay. We're missing a slide on director's comments, but like usual, I just want to say thank you all very much for your service, and we will keep you up to date as we move this recommendation forward. And with that, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Do we need a motion to adjourn?
No, ma'am, you don't.
Okay, all right. Then we're no further business. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, Kirby and staff. And
Have a good day.
thank you.